One of the things you can be virtually certain of in life is that you don't get something you don't aim at. And one of the things that's interesting about that is often people will keep their goals fuzzy. Because one of the problems with specifying your goals is you specify your failures. Right? If the goal is really fuzzy, you're not sure when you fail, and then you can fool yourself. You know, really, but you can kind of keep it foggy. But you make your goals sharp and clear. Then, well, first of all, then you know what to aim at. And what's interesting is, your brain is set up so that it reorganizes the world around your aims. And that's not, I've also written about this in 12 Rules for Life quite extensively, and that's not a metaphor. Like, we don't see much of the world. Because there's a lot of the world and there isn't much of us. And so we see what we aim at. We aim with our eyes. And here's an example. So like great apes don't really have much of a white in their eyes, but human beings do. And the reason for that is that we've evolved to detect where everyone else is looking. And so if I can't tell where you're looking, I don't know what you're up to. And then, well, over time, that means I can't read you as well, and we're more likely to get in a dispute, and one or the other of us is more likely to get killed. But it also means that your probability of finding a successful mate decreases. So we've evolved to have this very, very visually evident eye. And so when we're looking at each other, we're always looking at our eyes, because then we can tell where someone is pointed, and then we can tell what they're up to. And so we're hunting creatures, like we're aiming at a moving target and trying to track it all the time. And so you have to specify your aim, and the Future Authoring Program helps people specify their aim. And it's more than one aim. It's like you have a highest aim, which you might say is to be a good person. And then I would say, well, there's a more elaborated aim than that. It's like you want to be able to constrain malevolence and work to decrease suffering. It's something like that. That's the highest aim. And then you have to decompose that into the things you do each day so that there's a definite connection between all the micro actions and the macro aim. And then that gives dignity to what you're doing. I've told people to learn to use a schedule. And people often hate schedules because they act as their own tyrants, right? They say, well, you have to do this unpleasant thing, and then here's another unpleasant thing you have to do, and then you have to do this unpleasant thing. And you do that for about 3 days, and you think, to hell with this, I'm not doing that, and you fall off the wagon. That isn't what you're supposed to do with a schedule. You're supposed to use it to design the days that you would like to have if you were taking care of yourself. And so some of that is, you wake up in the morning and you think, here's 5 things I have to do that if I don't do, my life will be worse. It's like paying bills, for example, or taking out the garbage. It's like you have to do those because otherwise things degenerate. So you got to put some of those in the schedule, because otherwise tomorrow is worse than today, and that's a bad trajectory. But you also want to build in things, you've got to act in some sense like you're dealing with a relatively recalcitrant 9-year-old. It's like, so, well, here's some things you have to do, but here's some things that if you do, you could reward yourself with. And if you get the balance there between obligation and reward right, then you'll find that you're motivated to do the things. And that's what you want to do. You want to do that so it's sustainable across days and weeks and months. And so you got to treat yourself like a good boss would treat a valued employee, and not like a tyrant would treat a slave, because the slave will rebel. And, people say, well, I don't follow through on my plans. It's like, well, A, they're probably not very well formulated, and maybe you're doing them because of an external moral obligation or something. They're not really your plans, right? And B, you're acting like a tyrant and a slave, and that's a bad relationship to have with yourself. So you want to treat yourself with the same way. That's the golden rule, right? Treat yourself as you would treat other people as you would have them, treat other people as you would like to be treated. It works both ways. You also treat yourself like you treat other people properly. So that's a necessary thing, and often people don't do that. So I teach students, usually for this class, it was 3rd and 4th year students. And so this is at the University of Toronto. They're pretty smart kids. It's a hard university to get into, and they're pretty disciplined, and they're actually quite conservative, all things considered. And I was teaching them about stories, and about the fact that our life is a story with a goal and a purpose and a beginning point. And I was encouraging them to develop their own stories. So I had them write an autobiography And they really got into that. That was quite amazing. To identify, to break their life into epochs and then to describe the important episodes in each epoch, both positive and negative, and what they might do to reduce the possibility of the negative in the future and to capitalize on the positive, which is the purpose of memory, by the way. And then also to write a plan for the future. And so we formalized that. So the plan is, okay, first of all, you have to get yourself in the right mindset. And the mindset is you're trying to take care of yourself like you would care for someone that you cared for. That's a hard mindset to get into because people like their pets better than they like themselves often. And then you have to have a vision. And so the vision would be, well, okay, 3 to 5 years down the road, if your friendship networks were configured properly, what would that look like? If you were pursuing the career that would be appropriate for you and sustaining for you, what would that look like? How are you going to educate yourself? How are you going to take care of yourself mentally and physically? What do you want for an intimate relationship? And how are you going to handle temptations like alcohol and drug abuse? Because they take people down pretty frequently. So all you have to do is think about, okay, what could that be like if you had what you needed? Not some wild fantasy, but realistic in what you needed. So that's the first part. And then, okay, now write for 20 minutes about what your life could be like 3 to 5 years down the road if all of this came together. And then now do the opposite. So imagine all your weaknesses and all the ways that you can go down the wrong path. And then imagine that gets the upper hand. Then imagine where you are in 3 to 5 years. So then you get a polarity, eh? It's like not this and yes this. So you can run away from the things you don't want and you can run towards the things you do want. That gets your anxiety behind you instead of in front of you, right? Because maybe you're going to go do something difficult and you're afraid of it. And then you think, well, if I don't do this, I'm going to end up there. It's like, oh, okay, that's so terrible that this little terrible is nothing. So, and then in the next part of the exercise, you turn that into an implementable plan, and you write about why your life would be better and why your family's life would be better and why your community's life would be better. So it's like fully articulated. And we've tested about 10,000 university students with that now in 3 different locales. And we've increased the probability that they'll stay in university by about 30% and raised their grade point average about the same. And it's worked best for men who were doing the least well. So in Holland, those were non-Western ethnic minority men, and they improved their performance enough to actually slightly exceed the Dutch national women who were at the top otherwise over 2 years. Yeah, it was unbelievable. It just blew us away. A psychological intervention to cure what's hypothetically a sociological problem.